Hey now, cats, we're back again this week on the Balls From Ellwood Show. And with me, I have a man that I have admired since I've been a little boy. I used to watch him on Monster Vision. He now has a great show on Shudder called The Last Drive-In. We were just here opening night in Pittsburgh at his one-man show, Redneck Save Hollywood, which was brilliant. Please go see it no matter where he's at. The one, the legendary, Joe Bob Briggs.
Well, thanks for that, Balls.
Not a problem, sir. It is a pleasure to have you. I want to ask you a couple questions before you get out of here, because I love you, man. I've loved you since I was a kid, and this is an opportunity, sir, that I cannot pass up. So I'm going to get right into it, so you can get out of here, because I know after 2.5 hours, this guy performs like a crazy person, man. You got to go see the show. It's amazing. So I'm just going to get right into it. What trend in horror would you like to go away, Joe Bob?
I would like to see us give a rest to the horror comedy for a while.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Oh.
Because a first-time director should never do a horror comedy. You know, it's like even the great horror comedies that have been done by first-time directors, for example, Basket Case. Basket Case is 80% horror and 20% comedy. I mean, it's a horror film. It's a hardcore horror film, and a lot of young directors use comedy as a way to avoid the tough things you have to do to scare people. You know,
such as atmosphere and things like that.
Yeah, you know, it's really hard to scare people. It's really easy to pretend you're scaring people and play it off with a joke. You know,
that's very true. I agree. I think it's definitely an overpopulated thing, and I have to say, man, a lot of times I don't think horror comedies are funny. Like I'd rather keep it scary or keep it funny. Just choose one.
No, a lot of them are just sarcastic or snarky. They're not funny at all.
Yeah, and I don't really think there's any talent in that mostly. I mean, but anyway, what was the biggest obstacle in your career thus far, and how did you overcome it?
The biggest obstacle in my career, I always got fired. Everywhere I worked, I got fired.
Well, that's an obstacle.
Yeah, I would always be, politically incorrect in one way or another, and I would get fired for that, and or I would get fired. I always got fired for content-related things. I never got fired for being late to work or stealing money or anything like that. No, I only got fired for things that I wrote, and so. The biggest obstacle in my career was keeping it going, because I was constantly having to look for a new job, a new place to work. You know, occasionally people would write to me and they say, "How can you work for that awful," you know, like their current target. You know, like I worked for Fox for a while. They had a show called Front Page, and I was a Andy Rooney type guy on Front Page. You know. And, you know, people go, "How can you work for that Rupert Murdoch?" You know, well, you know, I'm going to work for anybody. You know, I'm sorry, but it's just like, you know, writing and acting. You know, don't criticize people for who they work for. You got to take the jobs when you get them. And like currently, I have a weekly column in this thing called Talkies Magazine, and people who don't like the other writers who are in it because they think they're right-wing lunatics. You know, criticize me for working for them. Well, I'm sorry, I don't. It's like I'm not responsible for the other people that work for them. You know, so now my point is, you know, I always tell people, don't go into acting or writing unless you absolutely have to, because it never ends. It never ends. You can always be fired. You can always be out of work, and so. You know, the obstacles are constant.
See, the people spoke, though, man. You're always resurrecting because people love you and they always want to see you back. So,
well, the reason I try to be close to the fans is that the fans always save my ass. You know, the editors are not loyal to you. The television executives are certainly not loyal to you. You know, and so the only people who, you know, constantly give you support are the people that read your stuff or watch your shows or whatever. And so I'm always like, I don't ever take that for granted. I don't care, you know, I always answer all the email.
I know, that's one good thing. I mean, you answered mine immediately. We went back and forth, and then Yeah, I always thought you forgot about me, and then out of the blue, you're like, hey, next time you're in Pittsburgh.
Oh no, the reason you would think I forgot about you is that, for example, today is June 29th. I think I'm on the email for March 17th. So.
Yeah, but I was actually surprised, like, someone like you actually even considered getting back to me. It was, that means a lot to people like us, man. I really appreciate that. But I don't want to slow you down here, but what's one movie everybody seems to love that you just can't understand the attraction at all? I know you have several.
But, there's many of those.
What's your number one?
Well, there was someone here tonight with a Pieces T-shirt, and I asked her, I said, do you really like Pieces? And she said, oh, I love Pieces, And when we did the first marathon, we closed the whole 24-hour marathon with Pieces.
I remember.
Well, that wasn't my choice. That was my director, Austin Jennings, is 32 years old. He's a millennial. And that's one of his favorite movies in the world. And he was like, we got to close with Pieces. We got to close with Pieces. And I was like, Austin, Pieces sucks. And he said, rewatch it. When was the last time you watched it? And I said, well, I admit, I hadn't watched it since the 80s. And he says, well, rewatch it. So I went and rewatched it, and I said, still sucks, Austin. And he said, yeah, but it sucks in such an interesting way. Trust me. People are going to love this. People are going to love it. So we showed Pieces. I went with him. People did love it. I was wrong. And we've had several others like that where I'm just like, nobody wants to see this movie. He says, oh yeah, this movie will kill. And it's like a millennial thing. There's a thing with millennials of rediscovering 80s stuff and reinterpreting it, And so stuff that was absolute crap in the 80s can suddenly become
popular now.
cult items today. So I'm constantly surprised. Chud.
I know, that's actually what I was surprised at. And you know what it is? It's funny because as I was watching it, like when I was a kid, I'd watch it because they played on HBO like every 4 hours. And I remembered back then I really liked it. And then you were cutting on it, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe he's cutting on Chud. And then I sat there and I watched it through the marathon, and when it was over, I was like, yeah, this is kind of shitty now that I see it again.
I asked Austin what he liked about it, and he says, remember that box? Remember the box for Chud? I said, no, I don't remember the box.
The eyes used to glow, the VHS, yeah.
And he said, oh, it was such a great box. And I said, did you take the box home? Did you take the movie out of the box and put the movie in the player and watch it? Because, why would you be so entranced by the box?
That's bad when the box is better than the film, though.
Right.
But anyway, what's one thing that people assume about Joe Bob Briggs that's totally wrong?
They assume I drink more than I do. I do like to drink. I mean, I do like, but they assume I drink gallons and gallons of beer.
Because of the show.
I tend to drink more, whiskey and scotch. So a lot of times they bring me beers, and also they assume that I love Texas beers. I like Mexican beers actually better than Texas beers. But anyway.
What age did you embrace the horror genre, and what's the first film that really pulled you in?
I watched horror films when I was a kid. I mean, the very first horror film I can remember as a kid was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. But I didn't really start watching a lot of horror until I was probably out of college. I mean, I was in my early 20s, so it would have been stuff in the 70s. It would have been the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Exorcist, the obvious ones, that were huge hits at the time. All the Catholic horror came out in the 70s. The Omen, The Sentinel. Nobody talks about The Sentinel.
I remember The Sentinel.
I love The Sentinel.
That's a good one.
I wasn't just a horror fan. I didn't really become a hardcore exploitation movie fan until the early 80s when I became the full-time film critic for the Dallas Times-Herald. And I hated the mainstream movies. I hated the Hollywood mainstream movies. And I liked the art films that came over from Europe. And I liked the movies that debuted at the drive-in. And so I started reviewing the movies that debuted at the drive-in, not realizing I was the only person reviewing the movies that debuted at the drive-in. And that led to a friendship with Roger Corman, and that led to, what I ended up doing. So.
What scared you as a child, and what scares Joe Bob as an adult? Are they two different things, or is there something that still gets you?
Boy.
I mean, after all the crazy movies you watch and the things that we like as a horror fan, I always call it chasing the dragon. Like, I'm always looking for like that thrill, that excitement that you got when you first, seen this thing when you were a kid, and it's the scare and the great feeling of that exhilaration. And it takes really something special now to elicit that response.
Well, when you live in West Texas, when you live in rural West Texas, and you're a kid with an active imagination, anything that moves that you can't see, either because it's dark at night or because it's behind a bush or something, you think is a rattlesnake. And snakes scared me to death. And, we had 4 kinds of snakes that could kill you in Texas. And so I would say snakes were my number one fear as a kid. Even though I was a Boy Scout and they teach you about the very fact that they made us carry a snake bite kit with us, was scary to me.
Because you never know when that's going to break out, and have to use it. Did you ever have to use it?
No, I never used it, but I saw people use it. So that was probably my number one childhood fear. That's still a fear. I would still, snakes scare the shit out of me.
Is there any film that's so morally reprehensible that you wouldn't play it?
No, there are films that are so reprehensible they're not fun. There's a movie called Nightmare from 1981. There's many movies called Nightmare, but I'm talking about the one from 1981. That's it's told from the serial killer's point of view, where you are the killer. They were using a POV camera, like a.
Is that almost like the remake of Maniac?
Yeah, and so they're trying to make you identify with the brutal killer that's going up and down the east coast of New York, and that particular movie, audiences walked out on it. They didn't like it. It wasn't fun. I always use it as an example because people say, "Oh, these movies cause violence." Well, if they cause violence, then why do people walk out on that movie? It's because people don't want to identify with the bad guy. So it sort of takes care of itself. The morally reprehensible movie takes care of itself. It disappears.
What path in life do you think you would have took if you'd not been Joe Bob, you'd not been an author, and all these opportunities had not come along?
Boy, that's a good question. I probably would have been a teacher, because I like to read, and so at one point I was my parents were teachers, and
nice.
So I probably would have followed after them. I'm really glad I didn't, because I don't think I would have survived on the modern college campus. Because I go and I speak on those campuses, and it's like, whoa, it's like a different world from when I was in college.
It's really changed too. I'm a 42-year-old dude, and I just noticed the change. It's like things are really strange now.
Yeah.
Speaking of strange, what's the strangest thing a fan's ever requested of you? And hopefully it's not this interview.
Strangest thing, 2 or 3 fans have requested, have put elaborate tattoos of me on their bodies, and they want, and they would want me to,
like autograph it so they can get a tattoo.
So they can get that part.
That seems to be like a trend nowadays.
Make that part of the tattoo, and so, boy, talk about pressure when you're putting that on their arm or whatever. So that's kind of strange.
Has anybody ever got like overly amorous with you, like trying to put their finger in your butt or something?
No. No, why would you? What brought that to mind?
No, I see it like you're around a bunch of drunk people and they do silly, crazy things like whenever like, oh, Joe Bob, they come try to hug you. Or,
no, I mean, sometimes drunk girls want you to sign their boobs.
Have you signed a lot of boobs in your lifetime?
I've signed a few boobs, not very many.
You get a lot of trim being a whore host.
Not so much. I mean, I would say, I mean, you could see at the signing table, probably 80% of my fans are male.
So it's like a sausage party pretty much everywhere you go.
90%, yeah.
Huh.
You know, that's I remember Gunnar Hansen used to say, you know, I say, Gunnar, you like being a celebrity? And he would say, I would rather be Kane Hodder because, you know, all the girls like Kane Hodder and all the 14-year-old boys like Leatherface. You know?
I'm a 42-year-old boy that still likes Leatherface. My boobs aren't as nice, or I'd let you sign them. I'm sorry. Hey, what's one thing you like doing that would surprise your fans? That's like totally out of character for you. Like, do you knit?
No, I like Broadway musicals.
Oh, so do I. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a good shit your pants story? I think everybody has like one good shit their pants story in them.
What, where I've been scared, or?
No, where you actually shit your pants.
Oh, no.
I have. I asked everybody that comes on my show, and they always seem to have a good one. Or you can tell me one where you're afraid. That's good too.
No, I can't think of a time it's actually happened.
Okay, who do you feel is the most notorious serial killer and why?
Well, all the serial killers we know about are not very good serial killers because they got caught.
That's true.
So the best serial killer would be one that we don't really know who it is. And that would have to be Jack the Ripper, because we still don't know who Jack the Ripper was.
That's true. We still to this day don't. They tried to link it to the Zodiac killer, but I don't think that's. What do you think?
Well, that's true. We don't know who the Zodiac killer is. So you would have to say he's a pretty good serial killer. It has to be somebody that hadn't been caught.
If they made a movie about you, who do you think would play a good Joe Bob?
Oh, wow. Who I would like to play Joe Bob? Or who could play Joe Bob? Gosh, I don't know. I would like Bruce Campbell to play Joe Bob.
Oh my God, I would love that too. I only got a couple more for you because I know you want to get out of here. But in this age of streaming and instant gratification, where people could just click on anything and it's right there in front of them, do you think technology has become an asset or a detriment to like people like us that like cult movies?
I think technology is an asset because for the first time in history, you can watch all the horror movies. You can watch the horror movies from the silent era. You can watch the horror movies that were made last week. You can watch everything in between. But the reason that people like me are still around is that there's so much to watch that you do need a curator. And so we now have curators.
See, that's what's great about you. Like, I mean, I was going to ask you before, do you feel like a certain responsibility to guide people in the right direction? Because, like, I know myself at home have, like, 5,000 movies that I want to watch that I know in my lifetime I'm probably never going to get to. If I started now, I'm going to be 140 years old by the time I finish them all. So you're a very important figure because you actually let us know what's even worth, wasting your time.
Yeah, I should probably have more of a sense of responsibility about it, but I don't. I just talk about the stuff that interests me. So, and I'm by no means the leading expert because, there are guys who never leave their apartments, and they have watched thousands more movies than I have. And they love to stump me. They love to come up. They love to come up at the cons and say,
"I see him messing with you on the internet all the time."
Yeah, but when the guy starts and he says, "All right, have you heard of a movie made in 1968?" And I stop him. I say, "No, I haven't heard of it. I already know. Before you ask me, I have not heard of it. You're going to try to stump me. It's easy to stump me because you never leave your apartment and you watch all these movies.
Because you're a pathetic loser." I actually go outside the sun once in a while. Well, last but not least, whenever Joe Bob finally does decide to, go on that horse into the sunset, what are you going to do after you retire? You have any thoughts about that?
Oh, I won't retire.
You'll never retire?
I mean, you can write. I mean, fortunately, I'm a writer. You can do that. Well, you can do it until you get Alzheimer's. You can't do it when you have Alzheimer's.
Well, you can. It'll just be a little weird. You might find a new audience.
But no, I don't think I'll. I mean, retirement is for people who hate their jobs, right?
Absolutely.
If you love your job, you don't retire.
I'm looking forward to retiring every day.
Really? Yeah, I mean, I understand why people in union jobs retire, because the reason they're union jobs is they're bad jobs, So, but I'll never retire.
Well, that is great news to hear, sir. We love having you back, and we don't ever want you to retire. So I just want to take a few seconds to thank you for being a guest on my show and taking the time to do this. And where can we find you on social media? So my fans, I mean, all the people listening to my show already know who you are and probably do already, but just in case like one random person kind of tunes in, where can they find you on social media?
Well, the best place is Twitter, The Real Joe Bob on Twitter, or they can go to my website, which is joebobbriggs.com. So
excellent. So you heard him, cats. This was the man, the myth, the legend, my pal, and the guy I looked up to growing up, and I still do. Mr. Joe Bob Briggs, thank you very much, sir. Peace and love, peace and love. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, man.
Take care, sir.
Okay.
And we're back, cats, and it's time for everybody's favorite part of the show. You know her. I know her. It's now time for Xtina in her Depravity Corner. Xtina, what do you got to say this week?
Well, in keeping with our theme of Joe Bob and his special hicks and rednecks and, people of the South, this is sort of South, but it's more West. But a man in Arizona, he went to see another man about a horse and about a goat.
Sounds like a joke.
It does, doesn't it? It's no joke. Retired delivery driver James Allen Darlin. This was back in, I believe, 2014-15. He met with a man on a farm to trade sex with his dog for sex with the man's farm animals. Did we know? I mean, we've all heard about the sex trade and stuff, but I don't think I've quite heard it in this capacity. It doesn't get more redneck than this, people. I mean, seriously. So he regularly had, this is sick too. He apparently was like it doesn't list which one, but he was a delivery driver for a nationally known delivery service, either FedEx or UPS. He supposedly had sex with the pets of the people whom, if their pets were out or their doors were open, he would fuck their dogs. I mean, people, lock up your animals. Don't let the FedEx man or the mailman near your animals. Can you imagine? I begin to wonder, like, my one cat was real weird, and people used to try to tell me I think she was abused. I'm like, I didn't abuse her, and my roommates never abused her. I don't know who abused her. Maybe a freaking mailman abused her. I don't know. How freaking weird is that? So here's the best part. He offered up sex with his dog, who he called Playmate.
Oh, Lord.
For sex with other canines, miniature horses, and goats. He also talked about having sex with his own dog recently and discussed sex acts he planned to perform on an unneutered dog. Okay, I don't know what makes that so exciting, but anyway, here's the best part. The farmer who he was soliciting to was, in fact, an undercover officer.
Ooh.
Yay! So needless to say, they took this man and arrested him, and it was a 2-month sting investigation. He had become all too familiar to detectives, and they wanted to make sure that they got his ass, and so they had recorded calls, videos, emails. They wanted to leave no doubt in anybody's mind that he fully intended to carry out perversion, committing the crime of bestiality. Now, As far as, what he got, let me see what kind of conviction he got. That would be nice
Yeah,
to
what
know.
does a dirty dog fucker get?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see, sentenced to jail. Of course he was sentenced to jail, I would hope. But I wonder how long he was sentenced. He was sentenced to jail and 3 years probation. Bestiality, class 6 felony. Okay, but it doesn't say here what, like how many years he got. That's not cool. They seized his dogs, which I would hope. Can you imagine, like, and a lot of states are cracking down and, getting, like, together these bestiality laws. In fact, there's a case, and I was going to go into this one, in Pennsylvania, where 3 men were arrested and given, like, 20 to life sentences for committing crimes against farm animals. And there was 3 different men, and the messed up thing is they had this 16-year-old farmhand boy who they would force him to hold down these animals while they did these deeds. Ultimately, this 16-year-old boy turned them in and went into undercover, protection or whatever. But these men all got like practically life sentences, and they tried to appeal, stating that, well, that's not fair. People who've murdered got less sentences. Well, guess what? You are harming. It's almost, I don't know. They say that animal abuse leads to child abuse, which I think they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, excuse me, at least a child at some point can say something, maybe, And of course, it's still going to mess with their psyche. What's a poor, like, dog think? And what's a horse think? And then, of course, that's going to, in turn, make them, I would think, make them mean and angry and lash out. Makes you wonder.
I don't know. Sometimes it goes the other way too. I seen that documentary Zoo where they were classically conditioning them, and then they were like once the police raided them, like all the horses didn't know anything except how
to do it.
how to do the deed.
They want to fuck it. They want to fuck everything.
They were like trying to blow everything inside.
Oh no!
Yeah. It was crazy.
Oh, that's crazy. What a world we live in. What a world.
Yeah, what a world where you could tune into the information superhighway and hear stories about rednecks banging their animals.
Yeah, and these guys in Pennsylvania, they were videoing it and all that. I mean, you figure, they always talk about, all this child pornography and bestiality on the internet had to come from somewhere. Who's recording this shit? That's what I want to know, And that's where you got to get to those people.
Well, you can thank the internet because it made it so much easier for all these weirdos to get together.
This is true. They go on the dark web and they find these chat rooms with because I've heard all these stories
That's
like
how
that.
it all goes. That's how it's all.
What a sick. But see, can't they just have their own island? Send the
Dog Fucker Island.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Hey, why not, man? I think that might be a good idea.
I mean, take the rabid dogs and
send them all the Dog Fucker Island.
Right. I don't know. I wouldn't even want that I'd rather see a dog be put down than have it be tortured that way.
Well, there you have it.
There you have it, folks. There's our nothing says redneck depravity like animal fucking.
You got that this week, and I just once again want to thank Joe Bob Briggs. I want to thank the Regent Square Theater, and I got a big guest announcement next week, so make sure you don't miss that. Tune in, cats, and hope you enjoyed the show this week. Peace and love. Peace and love.
Later.